She married the Mafia boss nobody dared to touch, because she thought it was the only way to survive. A quiet nurse sees something she was never supposed to see, and by sunrise, she's forced into a marriage with the most feared man in the city. Everyone whispers that she won't last a week beside him, but the terrifying part isn't his power. It's how he protects her like she already belongs to him. Just when she thinks she understands why he claimed her, she finds a hidden file with her baby picture in it, and a name she's never heard before. Suddenly, the danger isn't coming from him. It's been hunting her since the day she was born, and now every crime family in the city wants her dead before the truth gets out. What secret is powerful enough to make the deadliest man alive risk everything for her? And when she discovers who she really is, will their marriage save her life or destroy them both? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Abigail Hale peeled off her sweat-dampened scrubs in the hospital locker room. Her muscles ached after 16 grueling hours in the emergency room. 2 traumas, 1 cardiac arrest, and countless minor emergencies had left her physically and emotionally drained. The dawn light was just beginning to creep through the small window, painting the room in soft grays. She pulled on her regular clothes, dark jeans and a soft blue sweater, movements sluggish with exhaustion. Her reflection in the scratched locker mirror showed dark circles under her eyes, her honey blonde hair escaping its messy bun. Just another day, saving lives and keeping it together, she thought, shouldering her bag. The parking garage was eerily quiet at this hour, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The air held that peculiar pre-dawn stillness when night shift workers headed home and day shift hadn't yet arrived. She was halfway to her car when she heard the metallic clatter of a gurney. "Come on, you stupid thing!" A frustrated voice carried across the garage. Abigail turned to see Jake, one of the patient transporters, struggling with a gurney that listed badly to one side. The front wheel had completely seized up, causing the whole thing to pull sideways. "Need a hand?" she called out, already moving toward him. Even after a double shift, she couldn't ignore someone who needed help. It was hardwired into her DNA. "Thanks, Abigail." Jake's relief was obvious. "This wheel's been giving me grief all night." Together, they managed to wrestle the stubborn gurney toward the service elevator, Abigail throwing her weight against the stuck wheel until it grudgingly began to turn. Her good deed done, she headed back toward her car, ready to collapse into bed and sleep for 12 hours straight. That's when she heard it, raised voices echoing from somewhere. Behind the loading bay. Her steps slowed. The tone was angry, threatening. Something about it made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Don't get involved," the rational part of her brain warned. But her feet were already moving, drawn by the same instinct that made her run toward emergencies rather than away. She told herself she just needed to make sure no one was hurt. Keeping close to the wall, Abigail edged toward the loading dock. The voices grew clearer, male, speaking in rapid Italian. She peered around the corner, and her heart stopped. 3 men stood in a loose semicircle around a 4th, who knelt on the concrete, blood running from his nose. The standing men wore expensive suits that seemed out of place in the grimy parking garage. The one in the center radiated authority, his silver-streaked dark hair and sharp features marking him as someone used to giving orders. Enzo Cristano. She recognized him from the news, the right hand of Chicago's most notorious crime family. "Please," the kneeling man sobbed. "I can explain." "There is nothing to explain." Cristano's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You made your choice." The silenced gun appeared in his hand like a magic trick. 2 muffled pops, and the kneeling man crumpled forward, blood pooling beneath him. Abigail's keys slipped from her numb fingers, hitting the concrete with a betraying clatter. 4 heads snapped toward the sound. "Run!" Her body finally caught up with her brain's screaming command. She spun and sprinted for her car, but she'd only made it 3 steps before strong hands seized her arms. She fought, kicking and twisting, but they dragged her inexorably backward. "No witnesses!" one of the men growled. Something dark descended over her head, a bag that smelled of canvas and fear. Zip ties bit into her wrists as they bound them behind her back. She was lifted, carried a short distance, then tossed onto what felt like the floor of a van. The door slammed with terrible finality. The drive was endless, each turn and acceleration burning itself into her memory. She tried to track their route. Across the bridge, she was certain, then a series of turns that left her disoriented. Her nurse's training kicked in, forcing her to take deep breaths, fighting back panic with clinical detachment. Think, observe, survive. The van finally stopped. Hands pulled her out, keeping her upright as she stumbled on numb legs. Gravel crunched under her feet. The air felt different, open, with the scent of expensive landscaping replacing urban grime. The bag was yanked away. Abigail blinked in the sudden brightness, taking in her surroundings. She stood in the circular drive of a massive estate, all limestone and perfectly manicured grounds. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. This was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Inside, one of her captors prodded her forward, up marble steps and through heavy wooden doors into a foyer that screamed old money and older power. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across Persian rugs and antique furniture. They marched her down a hallway lined with oil paintings to a study that managed to be both beautiful and menacing. All dark wood and leather with hints of gilt catching the light from floor-to-ceiling windows. A man stood at those windows, his back to the room. Even without seeing his face, Abigail knew who he was. Power rolled off him in waves, filling the space like smoke. When he turned, her breath caught. Matteo Cristano was younger than she'd expected, probably late 30s, with classical Italian features that belonged on a Renaissance statue. But his eyes, those eyes were ancient, holding centuries of violence and control. They studied her with dangerous calm, giving nothing away. "Leave us," he commanded, and his men melted away like shadows. Abigail lifted her chin, refusing to show fear, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "If you're going to kill me, get it over with." A slight smile curved his mouth, more threatening than any scowl. Direct. I appreciate that in a person. He moved closer, circling her like a predator, assessing prey. "Tell me, what did you see in that garage?" "You know what I saw. Humor me." She swallowed hard. "I saw Enzo Cristano execute someone." "And what do you imagine happens to witnesses of such things?" "They disappear." Her voice was steady despite her trembling hands. "Very good." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "Witnesses do not survive, unless they become something else entirely." "What does that mean?" His fingers caught her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "It means I'm offering you a choice, albeit a limited one. You will marry me tonight, becoming my wife, and therefore untouchable, or you will die before the sun rises. Choose carefully, Miss Hale." The world tilted sideways. "How do you know my name?" "I make it my business to know everything about everyone in my territory. Abigail Hale, 28, emergency room nurse at Chicago General. No living family, no significant other. Excellent performance reviews. A tendency to work extra shifts and volunteer at free clinics." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "You've been in my peripheral vision for some time." She jerked away from his touch. "You're insane. I won't marry you." "Then you choose death?" His voice was mild, as if discussing the weather. "Why would you want to marry someone you don't know, someone who witnessed a murder?" "Perhaps I admire your courage. Perhaps I'm intrigued by the way you ran toward danger rather than away. Or perhaps I simply decided the moment I saw you that you would be mine." He stepped back, spreading his hands. "The reason doesn't matter. What matters is your choice, marriage or death. You have 30 seconds to decide." Abigail's mind raced. There had to be another way out. But looking into those implacable eyes, she knew there wasn't. He would kill her without hesitation if she refused. At least if she agreed, she'd stay alive long enough to possibly escape later. "Time's up," Matteo said softly. "What's your answer?" She took a deep breath, weighing her next words carefully. They would either save her life or end it. "I choose marriage." Wise decision. That dangerous smile returned. "Welcome to the family, future Mrs. Cristano." The chapel's stained glass windows cast jewel-toned shadows across the marble floor, a mockery of beauty in this moment of forced ceremony. Abigail's hands wouldn't stop shaking as two silent housemaids stripped away her scrubs, replacing them with a simple white slip dress that whispered against her skin. The fabric was expensive, silk, probably, but felt like a shroud. She caught glimpses of Matteo through the chapel's arched doorway as the maids worked. He stood in profile, issuing quiet orders to his men, who guarded every possible exit. His pristine black suit absorbed the colored light, making him look carved from shadow. Even from here, his presence filled the space like smoke, suffocating in its intensity. "Please," Abigail whispered to one of the maids, a young woman with kind eyes. "Help me." The maid avoided her gaze, fingers trembling as she smoothed the dress. Neither servant spoke, their silence more telling than words. They were as trapped as she was, just in different ways. Matteo entered the chapel proper, his footsteps echoing. "Everything is prepared." It wasn't a question. His men positioned themselves along the walls, 6 of them, all armed, all watching her with blank expressions that promised swift violence if she tried to run. The priest arrived minutes later, an elderly man who couldn't quite hide his terror of Matteo. His hands shook as he opened his prayer book, dropping it once before managing to steady himself. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the chapel's cool air. "Proceed," Matteo commanded, taking his place beside Abigail at the altar. A pistol lay there, gleaming dully against the white cloth, a silent reminder of her choice. "We are gathered here," the priest began, rushing through the words as if speed might somehow lessen their weight. Abigail's voice cracked as she tried to protest. "I can't." Matteo's hand closed around her wrist, gentle but immovable, his thumb pressed against her pulse point. "You can and you will." His voice was soft, meant only for her ears. "Remember your choice, Kara. Life or death. Choose again." She looked up at him, searching for any crack in his marble facade, any hint of humanity she might appeal to. His dark eyes met hers, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered there. Not warmth, exactly, but perhaps understanding. Then it vanished, replaced by that familiar, dangerous calm. The priest continued, stumbling over the words. When he reached the exchange of rings, Matteo produced a band of platinum and diamonds that probably cost more than Abigail made in a year. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he slid it onto her finger, his calloused skin warm against hers. "With this ring, I thee wed," he said, each word precise and weighted with finality. The ring felt like a manacle, beautiful but binding. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the priest finished, clearly relieved to be done. He practically ran from the chapel, leaving Abigail alone with her new husband and his men. Matteo's hand moved from her wrist to the small of her back, guiding her toward the door. "Come, I'll show you to your new home." The estate was massive, a maze of corridors and staircases that led to a private elevator. Matteo pressed his thumb to a biometric scanner and the doors slid open silently. They rode up 6 floors to what must have been his personal penthouse. The space was stunning, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern luxury softened by traditional Italian touches. A massive living area opened onto a terrace with views of the Chicago skyline. The furniture looked expensive but comfortable, in shades of cream and deep blue. "Your room is through here," Matteo said, leading her down a hallway to a suite that could have housed her entire apartment. The king-size bed was draped in silk sheets that matched the slip dress they'd forced her into. "This isn't necessary," Abigail said, finding her voice again. "You've made your point. I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just let me go." Matteo turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You're my wife now. You'll stay here, under my protection." "Protection?" She laughed bitterly. "You mean imprisonment? Call it what you like. The reality remains the same." He moved closer, crowding her personal space without actually touching her. "You're mine now, Abigail. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." "And if I don't accept it?" His smile was cold. "Then it will be very difficult indeed. But you'll remain here either way." She lifted her chin, refusing to back down. "I'm a nurse. I have patients who need me." "Your resignation has already been submitted, citing personal reasons." "You can't just—" "I can, and I have." He stepped back, heading for the door. "Everything you need is here. The closet has been stocked with clothes in your size. You have full access to this floor, but the elevator won't respond to your prints. Don't bother trying to leave." "So, I'm just supposed to sit here like a bird in a gilded cage?" "You're supposed to adjust to your new reality." He paused in the doorway. "Rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss your new role in more detail." The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. Abigail sank onto the bed, her legs finally giving out. The silk sheets whispered against her skin as she lay back, staring at the ceiling. From the next room she could hear Matteo's voice, low, controlled, speaking in rapid Italian. She caught phrases here and there, her high school, language classes providing just enough understanding to make her blood run cold. "Double the security," he was saying. "They know she's alive. No, I won't risk." Yes, immediate effect. Abigail rolled onto her side, curling into herself. The diamond ring caught the light, throwing rainbow prisms across the wall. Such a beautiful thing, meant to symbolize love and commitment, twisted into something darker. Like everything else in this nightmare, she couldn't seem to wake from. Outside, Chicago glittered beneath a blood-red sunset, the city carrying on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In the space of 12 hours, she'd gone from independent woman to captive bride, from witness to wife, from free to owned. The worst part was knowing that somewhere in this building, a man had died, the man she'd seen executed. And no one would ever know what happened to him, just like no one would know what had really happened to her. Mateo's voice continued in the next room, each word a reminder of her new reality. His tone never changed, whether he was ordering additional security or discussing what appeared to be business matters. Always controlled, always calm, as if arranging the complete dismantling of someone's life was as routine as ordering dinner. The silk dress clung to her skin, still smelling faintly of the chapel's incense. She wanted to tear it off, to scrub away every trace of this day, but she couldn't bring herself to move. Instead, she lay there, watching darkness creep across the sky, listening to the voice of the man who now owned her, discussing her fate, as if she were a piece of property to be protected and contained. Sleep seemed impossible, yet exhaustion pulled at her edges. The bed was sinfully comfortable, the sheets cool against her feverish skin. But comfort felt like betrayal right now. How could anything be comfortable in this beautiful prison? Mateo's voice grew closer, then stopped just outside her door. She held her breath, waiting to see if he would enter. After a long moment, his footsteps moved away, followed by the sound of another door closing. Abigail exhaled slowly, her hand moving to touch the ring she now wore. In the darkness, she couldn't see its sparkle, could only feel its weight, a constant reminder of the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, warming Abigail's face as consciousness slowly returned. For one blissful moment, everything felt normal, until the unfamiliar weight on her left hand registered. The diamond ring caught the morning light, sending prisms dancing across silk sheets that weren't hers, in a room she hadn't chosen. Reality crashed back like a wave. The wedding, the threats, the cage, no matter how gilded it might be. She sat up slowly, her nurse's training automatically cataloging her physical state. Dehydrated, hungry, muscles aching from tension. The slip dress she'd been married in had twisted, uncomfortably around her body during her restless night. A knock at the door made her jump. "Breakfast is served, Mrs. Cristano." The maid's voice was carefully neutral. Abigail's stomach turned at the name, but hunger won out over pride. She found a robe laid out on a nearby chair, silk, like everything else in this prison, and wrapped it around herself before stepping into the main living area. Mateo sat at a glass dining table, reading something on his tablet. He didn't look up as she approached, but she noticed how his posture shifted slightly, acknowledging her presence. A spread of breakfast foods covered the table, fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, coffee service. It looked like a luxury hotel buffet. "Sit." He didn't phrase it as a request. Abigail slid into the chair furthest from him, eyeing the sharp knife next to her plate with consideration. "Don't!" His voice was soft but carried clear warning. "You wouldn't make it past the door, and I'd hate to have you restrained during meals." She dropped her hands to her lap, cheeks burning. Of course he'd read her thoughts. A maid appeared silently to pour coffee, then disappeared again. Abigail watched the steam rise from her cup, trying to ignore how Mateo studied her over the rim of his own. "Eat," he commanded. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" "For adjusting to your new life." He set down his tablet, finally giving her his full attention. "Your clothes have been unpacked in the master closet. The gym is fully equipped if you wish to exercise. The library has an extensive collection. Whatever you need for comfort will be provided." "Except freedom." His expression didn't change. "That's not negotiable." Abigail picked at a croissant, watching him from beneath her lashes. Despite his cool demeanor, she noticed small signs of fatigue, slight shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. He'd been up all night, dealing with whatever situation had him ordering extra security. Movement caught her eye. A service door left slightly ajar by a hurrying maid. Beyond it, she glimpsed stairs. Her heart rate kicked up. Mateo's phone rang. He checked the screen, jaw tightening. "I need to take this." He stood, moving toward his office. "Eat. We'll discuss your schedule later." The moment his office door closed, Abigail was moving. She slipped through the service door into a narrow stairwell, bare feet silent on the steps. Down 3 flights, following emergency exit signs, pulse pounding in her ears. She emerged into manicured gardens, morning dew soaking the hem of her slip dress. The main gates were too far, too obvious. But beyond the formal gardens, she spotted docks stretching into Lake Michigan. If she could reach a boat, Abigail ran. Past perfectly trimmed hedges and burbling fountains, muscles burning, lungs heaving, the docks grew closer. 20 yards, 10, 5. Gunfire exploded behind her. She dove behind a stone planter as bullets sprayed the air where she'd been standing. Shouts in Italian echoed across the grounds. More gunfire, coming from multiple directions now. "There!" someone yelled in accented English. "The girl!" Footsteps pounded toward her hiding spot. Abigail coiled to run again, but strong arms grabbed her from behind, a familiar cologne filling her nose as Matteo pulled her against his chest. "Stay down," he growled, shielding her with his body as another burst of gunfire peppered their position. She felt the impact as bullets struck the planter inches from their heads. "Move." He yanked her up, keeping his body between her and the shooters as they sprinted toward a boathouse. More of Matteo's men appeared, returning fire, covering their retreat. Inside the boathouse, Matteo shoved her behind a workbench, his gun appearing in his hand as he scanned for threats. "What the fuck were you thinking?" he snarled. "Running outside when you knew they were watching? When you knew what kind of danger?" A window shattered. Matteo fired twice, and someone screamed. "We need to reach the house," he said, voice deadly calm despite the chaos. "When I move, you stay behind me, understand?" She nodded, trembling. "Now!" They burst from the boathouse, Matteo's arm locked around her waist, his other hand holding his weapon ready. His men had created a corridor of cover fire, forcing the attackers back. Abigail glimpsed dark figures retreating through the trees as security swarmed the grounds. Matteo didn't slow until they reached the house, half carrying her through reinforced doors that slammed shut behind them. In the marble foyer, he finally released her, spinning to grip her shoulders. "Never again," he said, voice shaking with fury and something else. Fear. "You never leave this house without me, ever." She stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. The lethal grace, the coiled violence, the fierce protectiveness that had made him use his own body as her shield. Blood stained his expensive suit where a bullet had grazed his arm, but he didn't seem to notice. "Lock down the estate," he ordered the men flooding the foyer. "Full sweep of the grounds. I want to know how they got past the perimeter." Abigail's legs gave out. Matteo caught her before she hit the floor, lifting her easily into his arms. She should have fought, should have pushed away, but the adrenaline crash left her boneless, head falling against his shoulder. "I told you," he murmured as he carried her toward the elevator. "The danger isn't in here with me, it's out there. The only way you survive is under my protection." She wanted to argue, to deny the truth of his words, but the memory of bullets singing past her head, of strange men shouting for the girl, left her silent. The elevator doors closed on chaos below, men shouting orders, weapons being distributed, medical teams arriving for the wounded. Matteo's heart beat steady under her ear, his arms secure around her, despite his injury. This man had killed someone in front of her yesterday, had forced her into marriage at gunpoint, had imprisoned her in a gilded cage. This same man had just risked his life to protect her, moving with lethal efficiency to keep her safe from worse threats than himself. As the elevator carried them upward, Abigail faced a sickening realization. There truly was no way out. The cage might be gilded, but the dangers lurking beyond its bars were very real. And Matteo Cristano, for all his brutality, was the only thing standing between her and those who would do far worse than marry her at gunpoint. "You're shaking," he observed quietly. "I'm fine." "You're in shock." The elevator opened directly into their penthouse suite. "You need a hot shower, dry clothes, and something to calm your nerves." It wasn't a suggestion." He set her on her feet in the bedroom, keeping one hand on her arm until he was sure she was steady. "Shower, change. I'll have tea brought up." She wanted to refuse on principle, but her wet clothes clung uncomfortably, and she could still smell gunpowder and fear on her skin. Without another word, she fled to the bathroom, locking the door between them. The shower's hot water couldn't wash away the morning's events, but it helped restore some semblance of control. She emerged wrapped in a thick robe to find fresh clothes laid out, practical, expensive, and exactly her size. Like everything else in this beautiful prison, selected with disturbing attention to detail. Matteo waited in the sitting area, his bloody jacket gone, shirt sleeve rolled up, while a doctor finished bandaging his arm. He dismissed the doctor with a nod, then gestured to the tea service on the coffee table. "Drink," he ordered. "It will help with the shock." Abigail sank into an armchair, wrapping both hands around the delicate teacup. Who were they? Enemies who now know my greatest weakness. His expression darkened. You understand now why you can't leave? Why I need you, where I can protect you? She stared into her tea, unable to meet his eyes. Because he was right. She did understand. The reality of her situation had become brutally clear in a hail of bullets and the desperate grip of his arms around her. The cage might be gilded, but its bars were forged from necessity as much as possession. And her captor, for all his sins, was also her shield against worse monsters lurking in the shadows of his world. The marble floors of Matteo's study echoed with controlled fury as he paced before his security chief, Marco. Blood still stained his shirt sleeve where the doctor had bandaged him, but his focus remained razor-sharp. Explain to me, Matteo's voice cut through the tension like steel, how armed men breached our perimeter and reached the docks without detection. Abigail pressed herself deeper into the alcove outside his office, her heart hammering. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but curiosity drove her to linger after a guard escorted her downstairs for her safety. Marco shifted his weight, weapon heavy on his hips. The cameras on the southeast corner were looped, boss. Professional job. We're reviewing staff rotations now. I don't want reviews, Matteo snarled. I want names. Someone let them in. Someone knew exactly when to strike. He stopped pacing, and even from her hidden position, Abigail felt the temperature in the room drop. When you find the leak, Marco, bring them to me. I'll bury them alive for this breach. Abigail's stomach lurched. The casual mention of such brutality reminded her exactly what kind of man she'd been forced to marry. She started to retreat, but Matteo's next words froze her in place. Double the guards on my wife. No one comes near her without my explicit permission. Yes, boss. About Mrs. Cristano, there's something else you should see. Paper rustled as Marco handed over what looked like a file. The intel team finished processing Romano's devices. Matteo's silence as he read was deafening. Finally, he closed the file with deliberate care. Leave us. Send my wife in. Abigail barely had time to scramble back before Marco emerged. He nodded to her, gesturing toward the office door. The boss wants to see you. Inside, Matteo stood at the window, overlooking the estate grounds, tension visible in every line of his body. The setting sun cast long shadows across his face as he turned to watch her enter. Despite her fear, she lifted her chin and met his gaze. Sit down, Abigail. He indicated one of the leather chairs before his massive desk. When she hesitated, he added, Please. The unexpected courtesy threw her. She perched on the chair's edge, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Are you going to tell me what's really going on? Yes. He moved to lean against the desk, close enough that she caught the faint scent of gunpowder still clinging to his clothes. You witnessed something you weren't supposed to see in that parking garage. But that's not why I married you. She blinked. What? The man you saw die, Romano, was selling information. Specifically, information about a powerful family that was supposedly wiped out 15 years ago. The Venturi Syndicate. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Matteo's expression remained unreadable. Your name came up in Romano's files days before the hit. He'd traced a connection, one that made you valuable to my enemies and deadly to yourself if discovered. Cold dread crept up Abigail's spine. What connection? Your birth certificate lists your mother as Sarah Hale, but there's no record of your father. He paused, studying her face. According to Romano's intel, your father was Adrian Venturi, the last true leader of the syndicate before their massacre. The room spun slightly. Abigail gripped the chair arms, trying to ground herself. That's impossible. I'm a nurse from Cleveland. I'm nobody. You're the last living Venturi heir. Matteo's voice softened fractionally. Once that information got out, you would have been dead within days. Every major family would want to eliminate the threat of a Venturi resurrection. Every minor player would try to use you as a puppet to claim legitimacy. So you, she swallowed hard. You married me to protect me from your own people? He nodded once. A Mafia wife is untouchable. To harm you now would mean war with me personally. No one's foolish enough to risk that. Abigail stood abruptly, needing to move. Her mind raced with implications. Why should I believe any of this? Because I'm the only one telling you the truth. He straightened, closing the distance between them. I could have killed you in that garage. Instead, I chose to protect you. By forcing me to marry you at gunpoint? By giving you the only shield that would work. His hand rose, almost touching her face before dropping away. I'm not a good man, Abigail, but I'm the only thing standing between you and people who would do far worse than make you my wife." The confusing mix of fear and reluctant gratitude churned in her stomach. Before she could sort through her feelings, a harsh electronic wail cut through the air. Mateo was moving instantly, crossing to a security panel on the wall. "Southern fence breach," he snapped into his phone. "Full response team now." He turned to Abigail, all trace of softness gone. "Stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "Mateo." "I mean it." His eyes blazed with intensity. "Whatever you hear, whatever happens, stay hidden until I come for you." He was gone before she could respond, the door closing firmly behind him. Abigail's hands shook as she turned the lock, then backed away toward his desk. Gunshots crackled in the distance, making her flinch. She gripped the edge of the massive desk, staring out the window at the darkening grounds. More shots rang out, closer now. Voices shouted orders she couldn't quite make out. The reality of her situation crashed over her in waves. She wasn't just married to a dangerous man. She was born into danger she never knew existed. The truth of her heritage had painted a target on her back long before she ever saw Mateo Cristano execute a man in that parking garage. Her fingers tightened on the polished wood as another burst of gunfire echoed through the night. The danger surrounding her was vast, complex, and completely inescapable. And the most terrifying part was that Mateo, the man who had essentially kidnapped her, might be her only chance of survival. Movement caught her eye in the gardens below. Dark figures darted between the topiaries, muzzle flashes bright in the gathering dusk. She watched, heart in her throat, as Mateo's men engaged the intruders with lethal efficiency. Somewhere in that chaos was her new husband, fighting to protect his territory, and by extension, her. The gunfire intensified, and Abigail sank into Mateo's chair, hands pressed to her ears. She was a trauma nurse. She'd dealt with gunshot victims, seen the aftermath of violence. But this was different. This was personal. This was her life now, whether she wanted it or not. More shouts erupted from the grounds, followed by a series of sharp cracks that made her jump. She gripped the desk harder, knuckles white, as the reality of her situation truly sank in. The danger wasn't just Mateo or his organization or even the unnamed enemies trying to breach the estate walls. The real threat was the blood running through her veins, a heritage she'd never known about that made her a target for forces she barely understood. And as gunshots continued to echo through the night, Abigail faced the terrifying realization that her entire world had become far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Dawn crept over the estate, painting the sky in muted pinks and grays. Abigail hadn't moved from Mateo's office chair, her muscles stiff from hours of tension. The gunfire had finally ceased an hour ago, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The door handle turned, and she jerked upright. Mateo stepped inside, his pristine suit marred by dark bloodstains. His face was hard, predatory, but his eyes softened fractionally when they landed on her. "Are you hurt?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Not my blood." He loosened his tie, studying her. "You stayed put. Good." Abigail rose on shaky legs. "I want the truth. All of it. Why do people want me dead?" Mateo's jaw tightened. He crossed to the bar cart, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey. "You're valuable to certain parties. Value, in our world, is dangerous." "That's not an answer," she followed him, anger giving her courage. "I deserve to know why my life was destroyed overnight." "Your life wasn't destroyed." His voice went cold. "It was saved. The rest isn't relevant right now." "Not relevant?" She laughed, the sound brittle. "People just tried to kill me, again, and you won't tell me why?" He turned, looming over her. "Knowledge is ammunition, Abigail. The less you know, the safer you are." The next days fell into a strange routine. Mornings began with tense breakfasts, Mateo reading reports while Abigail picked at elaborate meals she couldn't taste. He'd take calls, issue orders in Italian that made his men pale and hurry away. Abigail spent hours on the penthouse balcony, watching the estate grounds buzz with activity. New security measures appeared daily, additional cameras, motion sensors, armed patrols. She noticed Mateo's eyes following her movements, tracking her like something precious and wild. The evenings were the hardest. Mateo would return from whatever violent business occupied his days, shed his jacket, and attempt conversation. Not demands or threats. Actual questions about her life, her work in the ER, her thoughts on everything from literature to medicine. "Why trauma nursing?" he asked one night, watching her over his wine glass. "I like fixing broken things," she answered. "Carefully?" helping people when they're at their worst. Something flickered in his eyes. Noble instinct, dangerous one. She couldn't help noticing things about him, the grace of his movements, the way his presence filled a room, how his accent deepened when he was tired. It was easier to focus on these details than acknowledge the growing heat whenever he stood too close. 5 days after the wedding, Abigail woke to shattering glass. Mateo materialized in her doorway, gun drawn. "Stay behind me," he ordered, voice deadly quiet. They moved through the darkened penthouse. Voices echoed from the living room, harsh whispers in Russian. Mateo pushed her against the wall, shielding her with his body. The next moments burned into her memory. Mateo's lethal efficiency as he rounded the corner, the sharp cracks of gunfire, 2 bodies hitting marble floors. Blood spread in dark pools as Mateo verified the kills, his movements precise and practiced. Abigail couldn't look away. This was who he was, death and violence wrapped in Italian wool. Yet when he turned to her, his touch was achingly gentle as he cradled her face. "No one will ever take you from me," he promised, blood staining his hands where they touched her skin. "I'll kill anyone who tries." The devotion in his voice terrified her more than the bodies cooling on his floor. This wasn't just protection. This was possession, absolute and consuming. Hours later, she lay awake in her bed, unable to sleep. The scene played on repeat. Mateo's fluid violence, the way he'd positioned himself between her and danger, the fierce possession in his eyes when he touched her. Her skin still tingled where his bloody fingers had traced her cheeks. She rolled onto her side, hugging herself. The man was a monster. She'd watched him kill without hesitation. But he was also her shield, her protector, perhaps the only thing standing between her and worse monsters, lurking in the shadows. The moon cast silver light across her blankets as she remembered how quickly he'd responded to the threat, how his first instinct had been to guard her. There was something terrifying in being the focus of such deadly devotion. More terrifying still was the part of her that felt safer, knowing he would kill to keep her. Sleep eluded her as memories swirled. Breakfast conversations where his wit surprised her, quiet moments when she caught him watching her with something like tenderness, the heat that sparked when he moved too close. She couldn't reconcile the man who discussed medical ethics over coffee with the one who executed intruders without remorse. Both versions were real. Both versions wanted her, to protect her, to possess her, to keep her. And somewhere in the tangle of fear and unwanted attraction, Abigail realized she was starting to want him too. The thought sent her bolting upright, heart racing. She couldn't want this. Couldn't want him. He'd forced her into marriage, kept her prisoner, killed men in front of her. The fact that he did it all to protect her shouldn't matter, but it did matter. Every time he stepped between her and danger, every gentle touch that followed violence, every attempt to know her as a person rather than just a possession, it all mattered. The attraction simmering between them grew stronger with each passing day, fed by forced proximity and the intensity of their situation. She pressed her hands to her face, remembering how his bloody fingers had touched the same spots hours ago. The contrast haunted her. His lethal efficiency in one moment, his tender concern the next. How could someone be both so dangerous and so careful with her? The night stretched endless as Abigail wrestled with her conflicted feelings. Outside, guards patrolled the grounds, their footsteps a reminder of the danger surrounding her. Inside, she lay frozen between fear and fascination, unable to stop thinking about the way Mateo had looked at her, like she was something precious he would kill to keep. The moon tracked across the sky as sleep continued to evade her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mateo moving with deadly grace, heard his promise echoing in her ears. "No one will ever take you from me." The words should have chilled her. Instead, they burned, leaving her restless and confused. Dawn wasn't far off when exhaustion finally pulled her under. Her last conscious thought was of Mateo's hands, how they could deal death so efficiently, yet touch her with such care. The contradiction followed her into uneasy dreams, where blood-stained fingers traced patterns on her skin and dangerous men whispered promises in the dark. Morning sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows as Abigail emerged from her room, still exhausted from the previous night's events. She found Mateo waiting in the living area, his dark suit impeccable as always. "You'll stay with me today," he stated, not a request. "I have business to handle inside the estate." Abigail crossed her arms. "I'm not a puppy you can keep at your heel." His jaw tightened. "After last night's attack, I need you where I can protect you." "You mean control me?" she countered, but followed him anyway, knowing resistance was futile. Throughout the morning, Mateo conducted meetings in various rooms of the estate, keeping Abigail within arm's reach. She watched him shift seamlessly between languages, English, Italian, Russian, as he managed his empire. His authority was absolute, yet his eyes constantly tracked her movements, as if she might vanish the moment he looked away. During a brief break between meetings, Abigail noticed him at his desk, reading what appeared to be old letters. The paper was yellowed, the Italian handwriting faded. Something in his expression made her pause, a rawness she'd never seen before, grief etched into the hard lines of his face. "Stop staring," he said, without looking up, but his voice lacked its usual edge. "Who were they from?" she asked, taking a risk. He carefully folded the letter, tucking it away. "The past. Nothing more." The day dragged on, tension building between them with every hour. Abigail bristled at his possessiveness, the way he positioned himself between her and every visitor, how his hand would settle on her lower back to guide her movements. "I can walk on my own," she snapped after the 5th time. "Then walk where I can see you," he replied, unmoved by her frustration. By evening, storm clouds gathered outside, matching Abigail's dark mood. Thunder rolled across the sky as rain lashed against windows. The power flickered once, twice, plunging sections of the estate into momentary darkness. Unable to sleep and tired of feeling caged, Abigail slipped into the hallway. The storm's shadows danced across marble floors as she wandered, enjoying the small taste of freedom. Her footsteps led her to an unfamiliar wing, where a partially open door caught her attention. The room beyond was clearly Matteo's private study, darker, more personal than his business office. Lightning illuminated leather-bound books, heavy furniture, and on the desk a wooden box left open. Curiosity drew her closer. Inside lay carefully preserved letters, dozens of them, all in the same feminine hand. One lay unfolded on top, and before she could stop herself, Abigail began to read. "Dearest Matteo, I know you worry, but I'm happy here. Antonio makes me feel safe, loved. You can't protect me forever, big brother." That was the last letter Elena wrote to me. Abigail spun around, heart racing. Matteo stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the storm-dark room. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "She was wrong," he continued, moving closer. "I should have protected her. That's what brothers do." Lightning flashed, illuminating the pain in his eyes. "What happened to her?" "The Rossetti family happened. They used her to get to me." His voice turned harsh. "Antonio was their cousin. The marriage was a trap. They killed her to prove they could take what mattered most." Abigail's throat tightened. "That's why you keep everyone at a distance. Love is a weapon that can be used against you." He picked up Elena's letter, fingers tracing the words. "I swore never to give anyone that power again." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. Without thinking, she touched his arm. "You can't shut yourself off forever. Can't I?" His gaze met hers, intense and searching. "You've seen what happens to people in my world. Anyone I care about becomes a target." "Is that why you married me? To protect me without having to care?" Thunder crashed outside as Matteo stepped closer, crowding her against the desk. "You think I don't care?" Heat bloomed where his body nearly touched hers. "I think you're afraid to." His hand rose to her cheek, rough fingers ghosting across her skin. The touch was electric, charging the air between them. For a moment, Abigail thought he might kiss her, could see the desire warring with restraint in his eyes. Instead, he jerked away as if burned, turning sharply toward the door. He paused in the threshold, shoulders rigid with tension. "Get some sleep, Abigail," he said, voice rough. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the storm and the echo of his touch on her skin. She stood there long after he left, heart racing, knowing something fundamental had shifted between them. In showing her his grief, Matteo had revealed more than just his past. He'd shown her the cracks in his carefully constructed walls. The letters in the box seemed to whisper secrets, of a man who'd loved his sister so deeply her death had frozen his heart, of pain buried beneath years of control, of feelings he wouldn't acknowledge, stirring to life again. Lightning illuminated the empty doorway where he'd stood, and Abigail wrapped her arms around herself, still feeling the phantom warmth of his touch. She'd glimpsed something rare tonight. Matteo's vulnerability, his capacity for deep feeling. The knowledge was as dangerous as it was thrilling. Rain continued to pour outside as she made her way back to her room, Elena's words echoing in her mind. "You can't protect me forever." But Matteo would try. He would kill, threaten, and control to keep safe what he considered his. The question that kept her awake wasn't whether he would protect her. She knew he would, with lethal efficiency. The question was whether she could protect her heart from the man who claimed to be incapable of love, yet touched her with such careful tenderness. Thunder rolled across the sky, a low growl that matched the tension humming through her body. Sleep would be impossible now, with the memory of his proximity still making her skin tingle, with the weight of his confession hanging in the air between them. Somewhere in the vast estate, Matteo was likely just as sleepless, wrestling with the walls he'd built around his heart, walls that were beginning to crack under the weight of whatever was growing between them. The storm raged on, but inside, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one that threatened to sweep away all their careful defenses and expose the raw truth neither was ready to face. Morning light filtered through the rain-streaked windows, casting muted shadows across the penthouse kitchen. Abigail moved through the space with growing familiarity, her bare feet padding quietly on the marble floors as she prepared her coffee. The routine felt oddly domestic, dangerous in its normalcy. She'd barely slept, replaying the vulnerability she'd witnessed in Matteo's study. Now the morning brought distance. He'd emerged from his room earlier, acknowledged her with a curt nod, then retreated to his office. The walls were back up, higher than ever. Steam rose from her coffee cup as she added cream, the spoon clinking against ceramic. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen, making her aware of how alone she wasn't. 2 guards stood outside, their shadows visible beneath the door. "Miss Hale!" One of Matteo's men appeared in the doorway. "The boss wants to see you." She followed him to the office, where Matteo stood by the window, phone in hand. His jaw was tight, shoulders rigid with tension. When he turned, his eyes swept over her briefly before returning to the message on his screen. "I have business to handle," he said, voice clipped. "You'll stay here. The guards will ensure it." "For how long?" "As long as necessary." He pocketed the phone, already moving toward the door. "Don't try anything foolish while I'm gone." "Like what? Reading more letters?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Matteo paused, his back to her. For a moment, she thought he might address last night's intimacy. Instead, he simply said, "Stay inside," and left. Hours crawled by like honey dripping from a spoon. Abigail wandered the penthouse, touching books on shelves, studying artwork that probably cost more than her yearly salary. The rain continued outside, transforming the world beyond the windows into a gray blur. In Matteo's office, she noticed details she'd missed before: a chess set with hand-carved pieces, a collection of vintage watches, and most intriguingly, a drawer in his desk with a heavy lock. Unlike the wooden box containing Elena's letters, this drawer was secured with modern technology, a keypad requiring a code. She ran her fingers along the smooth wood, wondering what secrets it held. More letters? Documents? Whatever it contained, Matteo clearly wanted it hidden. The afternoon stretched into evening. Abigail tried reading, then pacing, then staring out at the rain. She couldn't shake the feeling that Matteo's sudden departure connected to whatever information had surfaced about her supposed value to his rivals. Night had fallen by the time she heard movement in the foyer. Matteo entered, his clothes damp from the rain, exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders. Without acknowledging her, he dropped onto the leather couch, closing his eyes. Abigail watched him from the doorway. In sleep, the hardness left his face. He looked younger, almost peaceful. Before she could stop herself, she retrieved a soft throw blanket from the adjacent chair. As she draped it over him, her fingers brushed his hand. The contact lasted only seconds, but heat bloomed where their skin met. Matteo stirred slightly but didn't wake. She lingered longer than she should, studying the contrast between his deadly hands and the gentle rise and fall of his chest. How could someone capable of such violence also touch her with such care? Movement caught her eye as she turned to leave. The office door stood partially open, and in the dim light, she could see the locked drawer was now slightly ajar. Someone, probably Matteo himself, must have accessed it earlier and failed to secure it properly. Her heart beat faster. The answers she sought might be inches away, separated only by her own hesitation. Whatever connected her to the Venturi bloodline, whatever made her valuable enough to kill for, could be hidden in that drawer. Abigail glanced back at Matteo's sleeping form. Tomorrow, she decided, tomorrow she would look, regardless of consequences. She'd lived too long with questions about her past, about why she had no memories before age 7, about why her parents had been so secretive. The rain drummed against the windows as she walked to her room, each step heavy with anticipation. Behind her, Matteo slept on, unaware of her decision. She wondered if he already knew her secrets, if that's why he'd claimed her so abruptly, why he protected her so fiercely. In her room, she sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about the drawer, about Elena's letters, about the way Mateo's touch lingered on her skin even hours later. Everything was connected somehow: her past, his pain, their forced marriage, the threats against her life. The storm outside matched her internal turmoil. Lightning illuminated the room in brief flashes, thunder rolling across the sky like distant gunfire. Each crash reminded her of the shootout at the docks, of Mateo shielding her with his body, of the violence that seemed to follow him like a shadow. She changed into a silk nightgown, one of many items that had appeared in the closet after her arrival. The fabric whispered against her skin as she moved, a luxury that felt foreign, yet increasingly familiar. Like so much in her new life, it represented a collision of comfort and constraint. From somewhere in the penthouse, she heard Mateo stir. His footsteps moved from the couch to his room, then silence fell again. She imagined him lying awake, perhaps thinking of Elena, of the secrets he kept locked away, of the walls he built to protect himself from loss. Abigail slipped under the covers, but sleep remained elusive. Her mind kept returning to the drawer, to the possibilities it contained. Would the truth set her free or bind her more tightly to this dangerous world? To Mateo? The rain continued its steady percussion against the windows, a soundtrack to her racing thoughts. Tomorrow would bring answers, or more questions. Either way, she couldn't turn back now. Like the storm outside, some forces were impossible to contain once set in motion. She touched her hand where it had brushed against Mateo's, remembering the warmth of his skin. Even asleep, he radiated power, danger, and something else. Something that made her want to unravel his mysteries as much as her own. The night deepened around her, full of promise and threat. In the morning, she would search the drawer, consequences be damned. But for now, she lay in the dark, listening to the rain and wondering if Mateo was awake too, guarding his secrets as carefully as he guarded her. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows as Abigail paced outside Mateo's office. Her heart hammered against her ribs while she watched his dark figure disappear down the stairs to his morning meeting. This was her chance. The drawer beckoned her like a siren's call. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it open, finding a thick manila envelope inside. The seal was broken, its contents partially disturbed. She lifted it carefully, spreading the documents across Mateo's mahogany desk. Her breath caught. There, paper clipped to the front page, was a photo she knew by heart. Her 6-year-old self in a pale blue dress, dark curls, framing her small face. The exact image that had sat on her adoptive mother's mantle for 20 years. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That's impossible." But the evidence lay before her in stark black and white. DNA results, adoption records, and a name that made her blood run cold. Abigail Venturi, sole surviving heir of Alessio Venturi. Crime scene photos spilled across the desk, images that burned into her mind. A mansion's marble floors, stained crimson. Bodies. So many bodies. The report detailed how the Venturi family had been systematically executed, how rival families had conspired to eliminate every possible heir. Except her. Somehow she had survived. Her legs gave out, and she sank into Mateo's leather chair. The room spun as suppressed memories flickered at the edges of her consciousness. The smell of gunpowder, screaming, being hidden in a closet by someone whose face she couldn't remember. "I see you found it." Mateo's voice cut through her spiral. She hadn't heard him return, hadn't noticed him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How long?" Her voice shook with fury and betrayal. "How long have you known who I am?" He moved into the office, closing the door behind him. "I confirmed it 3 months ago. We'd been tracking Venturi leads for years, but the DNA match—" "3 months?" Abigail stood, scattering papers. "You knew for 3 months before you had me kidnapped? Before you forced me to marry you?" "I was protecting you." Mateo's jaw tightened. "The moment others discovered a Venturi heir existed, you became a target. Marriage to me was the only way to keep you alive." "Don't pretend this was about my safety," she spat. "This was about power, about using me to claim whatever's left of the Venturi empire." "If I wanted power, I would have killed you myself." His words cut like ice. "The Venturi fortune is gone. Their territories were divided decades ago. You're valuable only as a symbol, and symbols get people killed." Abigail grabbed the childhood photo, brandishing it. "You manipulated me. You could have told me the truth, given me a choice." "A choice?" Mateo's calm cracked. "The choice to run? To deny your heritage until they found you anyway? I've spent 20 years watching families tear each other apart over less. Your father's enemies would burn cities to eliminate any trace of Venturi blood. My father, she echoed hollowly. The word felt foreign on her tongue. I don't even remember him. Your mind protected you by forgetting. Mateo stepped closer, his voice softening. But they remember. They remember every Venturi they killed, and they won't stop until they're certain the bloodline ends. Tears burned her eyes as she stared at the massacre photos. So you owned me before I could become someone else's weapon? I claimed you before anyone else could destroy you. His hands clenched at his sides. Everything I've done, everything was to keep you safe. Safe? She laughed bitterly. I'm a prisoner with a wedding ring. You didn't save me, you collected me, like those letters from Elena, locked away where no one can touch them. Pain flashed across his face at the mention of his sister. You think I don't know the cost of loving someone in this world? I watched Elena die because I couldn't protect her. I won't make the same mistake with you. The weight of her true identity, of decades of violence and loss, crushed down on Abigail's chest. She gathered the scattered photos with shaking hands, unable to look at them anymore. You should have told me, she whispered. I deserved to know who I am. Abigail. He reached for her, but she jerked away. Don't! She backed toward the door, clutching the childhood photo to her chest. Just don't! She fled the office, tears finally spilling over. Behind her, she heard something crash against the wall, followed by silence. The truth of her bloodline followed her like a shadow, darker and more terrible than she could have imagined. Evening shadows crept across the penthouse as Abigail's trembling hands stuffed clothes into a small duffel bag. Tears blurred her vision, but her resolve remained firm. She couldn't stay with a man who'd hidden her entire identity from her. What are you doing? Mateo's voice cut through the silence. I'm leaving. She didn't turn around, afraid her courage would falter. Please, he stepped closer, his voice rough. I'm trying to keep you alive. By lying to me? She whirled to face him. By forcing me into marriage? Their argument escalated, echoing off marble walls. When Mateo reached for her, his own security guards hesitated, caught between protecting their boss's wife and following orders. Abigail seized the moment, darting into the service elevator. Through closing doors, she glimpsed Mateo struggling against his men's restraining arms. Rain soaked her as she fled into Manhattan by taxi. Relief flooded her system until black SUVs appeared. Masked men dragged her screaming from the quiet street into their vehicle. She'd escaped one cage only to fall into another. Abigail's head throbbed as consciousness returned. Cold metal bit into her wrists where ropes bound her to a wooden chair. Through swollen eyes, she made out the rust-stained walls of a warehouse, river water lapping outside. Finally awake, little Venturi! Marino Dalca emerged from shadows, his expensive suit incongruous against the decay. 20 years I've hunted proof you survived. Then Mateo. Cristano claims a nobody nurse as his bride? He laughed darkly. He signed your death warrant. Across the city, Mateo found her wedding ring glinting in mud near the gates. His roar of rage sent guards scrambling. Within hours, his men tore through every safe house and hideout, leaving broken bodies in their wake. While Abigail endured Dalca's endless questions, Mateo extracted information with brutal efficiency. Night bled into dawn, rain turning to weak sunlight. When his phone buzzed with coordinates to a riverside warehouse, Mateo loaded his gun with cold precision. He would paint those walls red to reach her. Dawn painted the warehouse district in pale gold as Mateo positioned his strike team. His voice was ice as he directed his men to surround the building. No one escapes. No mercy. Inside, Abigail faced Marino with false bravado. Mateo won't come. He only married me for show. Her heart hammered as she tried to buy precious minutes. Silenced shots dropped perimeter guards like shadows. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Gunfire erupted in staccato bursts as Mateo carved through Marino's men with mechanical precision, his eyes dead with grief and rage. Marino pressed a blade to Abigail's throat. Stop, or she bleeds! Abigail drove her elbow back hard. Marino stumbled. A single shot cracked through the air, and he collapsed. Mateo's hands trembled as he cut her free. I thought... His voice broke as he crushed her against his chest. I thought I lost you. Her legs gave out as they fled. Mateo swept her up, carrying her through smoke to the waiting SUV. No one will ever touch you again, he swore. Never again. Moonlight spilled across silk sheets as Abigail stirred in Mateo's penthouse bed. He hadn't left her side since the warehouse, his vigilant presence both comforting and overwhelming. His fingers traced her bruised wrist with terrible gentleness. I never meant to cage you, he whispered, voice raw. After Elena died, I swore I'd never care for anyone again. But watching you in that hospital, knowing they'd kill you, he drew a shaking breath. I couldn't let you die like my sister. Abigail touched his face. I understand now, but my name, the Venturi blood, it'll never stop bringing war. Matteo knelt beside her. The choice is yours. Reclaim your legacy or walk away from it completely. I'll support whatever you choose. Days blurred together as Abigail made her decision. She gathered the scattered Venturi allies, uniting them with Matteo's syndicate. In the grand meeting room, old enemies clasped hands, ending decades of bloodshed. Later that night, they stood on the penthouse balcony. City lights twinkled below like fallen stars. Matteo's arms encircled her from behind, his breath warm against her neck. You're mine, he whispered fiercely. I'll burn the world before I lose you again. Abigail turned in his embrace, meeting his dark gaze. I choose you, now and forever. Their kiss sealed more than love. It sealed a future where power and legacy were built on trust instead of fear. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.